Join us at Glossy's Beauty and Wellness Summit from November 11th through 13th in Napa, California. Influential beauty and wellness leaders will meet to discuss strategies and pain points, discover innovative tech, and ultimately make valuable business connections through one-on-ones and casual networking. For a limited time, we are offering $200 off with promo code GBS24, no spaces. Again, that's promo code GBS24 with no spaces. Go to glossy.co/beauty summit for more information and to secure your pass today.
Hi, and welcome to the Glossy Beauty Podcast. I'm Sarah Sprickfiner, Senior Reporter for Glossy Pop, and your host for today's episode featuring Lisa Guerrera and Emmy Ketcham, co-founders of Experiment. Ketcham and Guerrera met in 2019 at an event for the Sephora Accelerate program, which Guerrera participated in with her first business. Together, they soft-launched the brand in 2020 with a lime green silicone sheet mask. Since then, it has grown to include products like a glycerin-based hydrating serum, a micro-slugging oil gel, and a lip balm. Its first cleanser will launch in a few weeks. In April, Experiment announced a $3.3 million seed round led by Greycroft. On this week's episode of the Glossy Beauty Podcast, we discuss how the duo launched the company with just $8,500, being a brand for the quote-quote nerdy smart girl who ends up being really cool in adulthood, and why, according to the duo, science ultimately beat out clean beauty. Hello, and welcome to the Glossy Beauty Podcast. Today, I've got Emmy Ketcham and Lisa Guerrera, founders of Experiment Beauty, one of my favorite brands, one of what I think is the most exciting brands in skincare today. I met Lisa years ago at what was once pre-COVID, another era, our mutual co-working space. In a really funny way, I quite frankly was listening in on her phone call. I think what I said to her was, sounds like you work in the beauty industry. I was a freelance writer at the time, and she was working on a startup that was not Experiment. And we became fast friends, stayed in touch. And I have had a really, really unique first, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like bird's eye view, for inside look at Experiments.
Behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you. Why can't I?
Yes. I was trying to think too. I was like, you've seen the whole journey.
Yes,
like, I don't know.
Yes, like insider view.
Yeah.
Like even more so than I think what I often get as a journalist into Experiment. Experiment started, if I remember correctly, something like $8,000, right?
Yeah. It was about $8,500 that Emmy and I pulled together from our savings.
$8,500 and one product, a silicone sheet mask. How did you guys meet?
So when I did my first startup right out of college, I did that for about 2 years. So this was the years like 2017 to 2019. And it was called See-Through. It was an ingredient intelligence app, as I like to call it. But it was basically like Google Translate for ingredients. And I was a chemistry major, and I'd always cared about transparency in beauty and like ingredient education for beauty consumers. And so I made this app that was B2B. So brands could upload it to their Shopifys and make their ingredients list clickable. So it was one of the first like clickable ingredients lists. You might see these ingredients lists now on like Verst's website. It's on Credo as well. That's an old competitor, but I did that for, the first 2 years out of college, and was lucky enough to be in Sephora Accelerate in 2019. So I believe that was the fourth Sephora Accelerate they were doing. And I was pitching on demo day. I think that was in May of 2019, perhaps.
I thought it was the fall, but
I have no idea,
not
man.
Sure. It's been a long time.
Actually, I think you're right. I think it was the fall.
I have October vibes in my head.
Yeah, September, October, something like that. I remember because I had like a life crisis afterwards.
You did. You did.
I did.
Yeah,
I really did.
I remember that.
Yeah. So I was in Sephora Accelerate, and on demo day, I was pitching in San Francisco.
That's when you present to Sephora Accelerate, just for our listeners who don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
We're pitching in San Francisco in this big hall with a bunch of investors, executives from LVMH, Sephora. Then we table afterwards. And I remember I was one of 2 tech companies that were in Sephora Accelerate at the time, you know, with a bunch of beauty brands. So it was a little out of place, but I was happy to see like the engagement from all the different people coming up to my table, wanting to know more about like the tech. And I remember I even remember this because I remember, Emmy, you came to my left. Emmy was there actually because she was at Benefin. She can tell her side of the story, but she came towards my left and she like handed me her business card. I was like, hi, like that was really cool, whatever. And I took it, and there were so many other people I was talking to, but it was a lot of marketers and a lot of people who might not know much about chemistry, which was always like an interesting conversation because it's a lot about clean beauty. And like, that was more of the focus people were looking at it as like, oh, this is good for clean beauty brands. And I'm like, no, it's actually great for all brands, especially science brands who are using ingredients that might be less familiar to consumers. I looked at her business card and it said Benefit Cosmetics, like, I think senior R&D chemist. And I was like, I literally said, oh, thank God, a chemist. and because she would look like she was about to run away. And
I was trying to.
I was like, wait.
I'm very introverted. So I got an opportunity to go to demo day, and I saw Lisa up there amidst like a sea of clean and natural beauty brands. And I was like, this girl gets it. I remember specifically I had a little pamphlet and I circled her name, and I was like, I'm going to go introduce myself to her. Because I knew at the time that I wanted to start a company, but I'm very introverted. So my now husband actually at the time had given me homework. He said, you have to introduce yourself to 3 people. And Lisa was the first one I introduced myself to. And yeah, she's right. I did try to run away because I don't like networking. I was like, I'm just going to give her my business card. I'm going to say hi, and then I'm going to go, and everything's going to be fine. And she grabbed me, and we had a great conversation and just continued on after that.
I was like, ooh, I would love to like have her as like a chemist advisor or something for the company I was working on. But then as we started talking on the phone more in the co-working space that Sarah and I met at, I remember I was on the rooftop where Sarah and I met and having this conversation with Emmy. And I remember like, as we kept talking, we kept saying the same things about the industry and seeing the same patterns and really agreeing on like where we were seeing beauty going. And that's when I like went into an existential crisis mode, because I was like, I don't know if I want to be a B2B software person for the rest of my life. I think what I'm really passionate about in beauty is beauty products. And every time I would get on calls with brands, I was always constantly thinking to myself, like, I feel like I could do this better. I could do education better. Like brands aren't as invested in education or like transparency. And they say they are, but they're really not when you actually get on the phones with the teams. And Emmy and I just really, like, it was the first time where I felt like, wow, someone else is seeing what I am seeing on the brand side.
Yeah.
Because I had never worked at a big beauty brand.
Yeah.
I was like 24. So
one thing that was difficult too is at the time, like ingredient transparency was so intertwined with clean and natural beauty too. And so one thing that we saw is how like a lot of these other phrases were being co-opted by clean beauty, like transparency, safety, sustainability. And we wanted to be able to separate those things out and actually like embed them in science, not in clean beauty, not in natural beauty.
And yet, because I want to delve into all of that, but your jumping off point for the brand wasn't actually a topical product. It was essentially, and you still sell this, a piece of silicone. So not to, denigrate avant-garde.
No, it's hilarious. Actually, I love that. It is a piece of silicone.
It is a piece of silicone, right?
The grand scheme of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, I have this, again, the beauty world is so small. This very distinct memory of Lisa and I both live uptown, of walking from brunch with Lisa and her telling me about it. I can see the street in my head, but tell me about, why you guys started with that and why that felt right. Because I know that even then, I remember you did have these big ideas about what you could do differently. So why introduce the brand to the world and to who would become the experiment consumer with this lime green, I should mention, piece of silicone?
Yeah, I can start on that. There's actually quite a few reasons we started there, and they're both brand driven and business driven in a lot of ways, and time. There's so many pieces. So I think we'll start with when we were ideating on this brand. So obviously we had those conversations in 2019. I had my little existential crisis. I ended up stopping operations at my company and my startup. And it was mostly just me anyway. It was a very bootstrapped operation. I mostly just got pitch competition money in how I funded it. But I started working as head of brand at Apostrophe and teledermatology company. And I ended up moving to the Bay Area as a result. I moved a month before COVID, and Emmy was living in San Francisco. So I was like, oh, great. We can actually start really thinking more about this brand. And I remember, it was mid-pandemic, I feel when we decided this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a few things in mind. From the startup world and tech startup world, I had tried to raise money, wasn't really successful at the time. And I was so burned out from investors that I was like, I don't want to take on investor money. I feel we should just, it's gonna be, hard to do. We want to just get this out there. When you think about launching a beauty product, skincare, every founder will tell you that's an expensive endeavor.
Especially the way we wanted to do it.
Yes. The way we wanted to do it was right. We wanted to really spend time on formulation. We wanted the packaging to embody what we thought, where we thought the industry was going, which was science and but with culturally relevant, fun packaging. So we didn't want to have to skimp there. So we looked at our savings, and we had about, between the two of us, not that much. So we were like, okay, how do we really scrappily launch this? And I think looking back, some of that attitude was also from, the tech accelerators I was in prior, where it was it's very much move fast and break things. We were definitely trying to move fast and get something out there. And I remember having this silicone mask from Amazon that was very plasticky. Those pink ones that I'm sure some people have seen these. They're billed as sheet mask holders. And they're very uncomfortable to wear. They really hurt your ears. And especially during COVID, we're all wearing masks and your ears are kind of sensitive at that point. I remember I was in the bathroom and I don't fully remember. I feel like I don't remember if I came to you, Emmy, or we were together and I was look at this. I actually don't remember.
I think it was over Zoom. I remember you bringing it to me over Zoom and you were like, what if we made this better?
I was there's so many ways to improve this, and I can think of a million ways to market it, not as a sheet mask holder, which is an accessory, but as a product itself, as a sheet mask replacement. Mm-hmm. But it has to meet a few pieces of criteria. It has to be comfortable. It has to be cool, right? It has to, because the ones that are online and still today, they look kind of fleshy, for lack of a better term.
A little bit like ham.
Yeah, on your face, because of the pink and clear colors. And we wanted to make it cool. And I'm and this was also, TikTok was blowing up and skincare TikTok was blowing up. And I was I could see this crushing on TikTok. And at the time also, I was growing my following because I started making videos because I lived alone in the Bay Area during COVID. And I had just moved there. So I kind of was just bored. And I started making videos about beauty science and I started gaining a following on TikTok. So I'm okay, I can really see how this could work. And we did a bunch of research And we were like, okay, we found a manufacturer. We want to make some changes. We added a size. We changed the color. We wanted to make sure the silicone was super soft and stretchy. So we sampled a bunch and we had like a specific silicone. And I think when we compared also the prices of like launching skincare versus a physical object, a piece of silicone for like, and the MOQs, we were able to afford the mask. And I'm like, this is a great way just to get started, just to see if like the idea of experiment where we wanted to lean more into, you know, the ugliness of beauty in a sense. We wanted it to be a brand for not the cool Glossier girl, but for someone who it's like the really nerdy or smart girl who ends up being really cool in adulthood and is like actually the cooler person than the person who was popular in high school type of thing.
Yeah, I think of it a lot as someone who didn't feel seen by that kind of, and I want to talk about this next, but that like millennial pink aesthetic.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And we were kind of thinking about millennial pink and like the evolution of that to Gen Z, what's now considered Gen Z green. We were thinking about that very early on. We were actually one of the first brands, I think, to utilize that as their brand color. We were just so small at the time. We decided to make the mask that color because there wasn't really a color that would make the mask pretty regardless. Like it's not the chicest.
You're not going to look hot wearing a silicone.
Yeah,
you're never going to look
hot. Like, and so why try, right? Why not lean into the ugly and lean into the almost humor and meme of it all? You know, why can't we be a brand that actually like doesn't take itself too seriously when a lot of clinical brands and a lot of like aesthetic chic brands take themselves very seriously in those regards, but that's not real. I think what's real is people doing like ridiculous things in beauty and taking silly pictures. And we wanted to lean into that. And I felt really strongly that humor was a way to grow online. And it was. And so when we launched the mask, it was like, so many of our customers were like, it's giving Shrek, it's giving Jim Carrey's The Mask. It was like a meme in and of itself to wear it. And it still is today. We see that on TikTok right now. It's cool to see that like leaning into the ugly, like it was an experiment that we ran as a bootstrapped operation to see if this had legs. And it did. And, you know, that was really exciting. I think one other thing about the color is that we also chose that color not just because it was Gen Z green, because at the time it really wasn't. We just really thought it was the right color to choose for that, but also because that particular green, Emmy and I are both chemists and we're coming at it from that perspective. And that green is actually called acid lime in the Pantone world. And we chose that color because as chemists and I did my thesis on this actually in college, but we really know like how pervasive chemophobia is in society. And chemophobia is just irrational fear of chemicals. When brands say like, oh, we have no nasties, or there were some brands who say chemical free, like no things like that. It's really creating a fear around chemicals. But as we all know, like chemicals, we're all made of chemicals. Water is a chemical. That's not, you know, a good logical argument. But moreover, the way culture views chemistry, which is what I found in my thesis, it's what I studied. Chemistry is the most negatively viewed science out of the main branches of science. When people think chemistry, they think pollution and, you know, kind of all the negative plastic.
Toxic sludge
brought to you by chemistry. But the reality is chemistry is also the science of the consumer world. And I think it's really important for us in the brand, and we still, you know, this is part of our mission today, is really reimagining the way consumers are presented science. And so that green, while it's very popular now, was also picked for a very specific reason, which is that we felt like it almost subverted the idea of like that toxic green that people associate with chemicals. And we wanted to own it and make it cool. And so that's how we chose it.
I think it's a fun throwback because it was the first story that I ever wrote at Glossy in 2021 about the end of Millennial Pink, and you guys were in it, so I think we were really early adopters. We were Brat Summer before Brat Summer.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And Emmy, I think that takes us to Experiment's first product. And as Experiment's genius formulator, I think that you've done a really good job at sort of like really like leading ingredient trends, which is pretty impressive for a brand that is still small. Although you did just raise your first round. We'll get there.
Your
second round.
actually.
Your Series A.
Our
correct?
seed.
Yeah. Okay.
Our seed. Our seed.
This was your seed.
So we raised a pre-seed in 2021, and then we closed our seed in January. Yeah.
You just raised your second round. But Emmy, I wanted to talk about your first product, which really focused on glycerin at a time when everyone had been talking about hyaluronic acid as, the beauty ingredient's main, if not like only hydrating ingredient for probably over 5 years already, to the point that like when I think about hyaluronic acid now, I think about that like Eva Longoria commercial where she's like, hyaluronic acid.
Wow. I forgot about that until you just said it.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why is because, I always think about how we are in such a bubble with our knowledge of these things. And I think that's something that you guys probably think about a lot too. And I always use my mom and sister as my barometer of these things. It's like, do they know what these things that seem so commonplace to us are? Like, my sister's a PhD student. My mom works in the nonprofit world. Like, they're not thinking about these ingredients all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And so you guys started talking about glycerin, which I was not an expert in, but if you look at an INCI list, it's in all these products, like so many products, but nobody was talking about glycerin. Everybody was thinking hyaluronic acid. If you want to hydrate your skin, you use hyaluronic acid. So you guys come out with this serum. It's your first, like, so to speak, quote, quote, real product. Tell me about Super Saturated and the decision to put, I believe it's 30%. I'm speaking completely off of memory, which I think I'm doing a pretty good job, but tell me about
You're doing great.
Tell me about your first product and the chemistry behind it.
Yeah, well, it's actually really interesting that you say that we kicked off an ingredient or a trend with Super Saturated, because that was actually never the intention. I feel like there are a couple different ways to view innovation, and a lot of traditional companies that don't have chemists at the helm, that is their goal, that they want to be discovering new ingredients, starting new ingredient trends, and that's how they convey innovation. When I formulate a product, I actually think of innovation as making something that's better than what's already on the market. And I don't care how that happens. I mean, aside from obviously quality and safety, of course, but I want to make the best product, and I want to use the ingredients that are going to give me the best product, like marketing story, be damned. Am I allowed to cuss? Okay. So that's how we landed on glycerin. So a lot of like the reason, as you said, that if you look at the ingredients list for all of these products in the market, the reason you see glycerin in everything is because glycerin is the one that is doing the work. So you'll see a product that says they have this fancy mushroom extract that's hydrating your skin. Well, that mushroom extract comes in glycerin. And glycerin is the one that's hydrating your skin. And then the marketing story is pointing to the mushroom extract. And so we basically, like, part of our promise with transparency is that we're going to highlight the ingredients in a formula that are actually doing the work. And glycerin is just so underrated. It was doing the work in all of these hydrating products, and it was not getting any of the credit for it. So we thought, why not maximize the concentration of glycerin? Because glycerin, you can essentially go up to almost 100%, and it's non-irritating, it's non-sensitizing, it's safe for use. I mean, there's a point at which if you go beyond, because glycerin works in tandem with water, it holds water onto your skin. So if you don't have enough water in the formula, there's not really anything for it to hold on to. But that's really the only risk. So we thought, why not maximize glycerin? Because we can. And also because when you go beyond 25%, between 25% and 40%, it actually has barrier repairing benefits. There, you have a glycerin reservoir in your skin, and that glycerin gets into your skin, fills those reservoirs, and allows your skin to maintain plasticity and flexibility even when the conditions are dry. So yeah, that's kind of the science behind Super Saturated. Lisa, feel free if you have anything else to add. I'm sure you do.
You want to talk also a little bit about the reception of the product too?
Yeah, for sure. I can talk about also like the marketing around it too a little bit. So, I remember like and this is one thing that I think Experiment has a huge advantage on. And, as we launched more products, it's become clearer and clearer. But, we have an in-house lab. Emmy formulates everything that we do. And so that's pretty unique for most brands. Most brands obviously are, using R&D houses. And there's a time and a place for those. But for us, being two chemists and like Emmy having a ton of experience in formulation, like it just made a ton of sense for us to do that and allowed us to do experimental things like making a 30% glycerin product, which, and Emmy can attest to the culture in cosmetic chemistry, but that I feel like wouldn't have really been possible for us to achieve without the ability for us to like play around in the lab. Yeah. Right. I know that glycerin typically in most formulations, is, below 10% and definitely below 5%. And so that's great. It's hydrating, right? It's doing work. But like Emmy said, like above a certain concentration, 25%, you unlock, its barrier repairing properties. And I think that's why we've seen so many people love super saturated and be surprised by it and the results they're getting from it, because it's unlike any other hydrating serum. And I think the risk that we took, and again, allowing us, like having our own in-house lab allows us to do this and make this call without, outside pressure, is that, super saturated is not this water light serum that, feels like nothing on the skin. It's a touch tacky because glycerin.
It's goopy.
Yeah.
It's a little goopy. Glycerin is inherently tacky, and that's seen as like cardinal sin, right?
Yeah.
In the industry. It's like, and I understand that like, the consumer perception around tackiness is poor, but we were like, I think we can risk it. It's not that tacky, actually. I felt really strongly that the marketing story was so compelling that people would have to try it. And once they tried it, the results were so good that it didn't actually matter how it felt. It's not your last step in your routine. Mm-hmm. When Emmy came to me with like, I think I made this weird product, the glycerin concentrate. I was like, how much is it? She's like 30%. I'm like, oh, I already understand the marketing story. Like all unfolded to me like a movie. I was like, every dermatologist is going to love this.
Yeah. And I think that's basically that is how product development works at Experiment. Like the marketing story really does come after the science. The product is made in the best way possible, and then marketing is brought in to figure out how to convey that to the consumer.
Yeah. And Emmy and I were also very fortunate that like I head up a lot of the marketing, and I have a chemistry background. So I think we're uniquely set up to be able to achieve that and be able to tell a compelling marketing story once a product is like, okay, we made the best possible version. And it's easy for me to kind of go in and look at the ingredients and talk at a deeper level on how these ingredients work and figure out how to communicate that to consumers. So for super saturated, when we had launched it, there were, as usual with an early brand, there are delays all the time with launching things. And so
many.
Comes up on every podcast. Don't worry.
Yeah. And the strategy we took was somewhat intentional, somewhat accidental. But when we launched Avant Garde, actually, we were anticipating super saturated to be out like 3 months afterwards. And we launched our current version of Avant Garde 2.0. This was post fundraise. We launched it, and we actually have a patent pending on this one. So we redesigned it and stuff like that. But we launched that in April of 2022, and we were anticipating super saturated to be out maybe 2 or 3 months afterwards. Mm-hmm. Not the case. And so we lab sampled super saturated to everyone we gifted PR to for the launch of Avant Garde, because we wanted people to use the serum with the mask. And because that launch kept getting delayed, we had so many influencers who ran out. They wanted more. And Emmy kept making lab samples for people and sending it to them. And so 6 months passed by, basically. And we are launching super saturated 10 days finally before Black Friday. That was like the last possible time we could do it. I remember like late night packing these influencer boxes. And when we launched it, we sent it to all the influencers that had tried super saturated in the past with the lab samples. We had newer influencers who ended up accidentally posting early, and it actually helped build our wait list up for it. And so all that lab sampling actually really paid off because on launch day for Super Saturated, we had so many influencers who were already itching to talk about it and like chomping at the bit to like tell people how good it is. And it really just took off from there. It was a moment where I was like, wow, we reached product market fit. The saying is like, if you have to ask the question, then you haven't reached product market fit. And I'm like, I didn't even have to ask. It was right there. And so we had really, really like closed that year really strong with Super Saturated. And then going into 2023, which was, a great year for Super Saturated as well. We had Michaela organically talk about the product in a dedicated video on TikTok that went viral. We sold out twice. We built up a wait list of 10,000 people during the famous Super Saturated drought of 2023, where we were sold out for nearly 3 months, which was a hard time for the business, but it led to our biggest sales day ever.
When it came back.
Yeah.
Yes, it was our first 6-figure day. That was an intense and exciting moment when we finally restocked, and the whole internet seemingly was like waiting for, the whole skincare internet was waiting for the product to come back.
No,
and
the whole internet, Lisa.
The whole internet, a couple billion people. So I think like Super Saturated, not only were we able to come up and launch a product that was fundamentally different than the sea of hyaluronic acid serums that were being touted to consumers, and still launching, continuing to launch.
Fair.
Yeah, look, the hyaluronic acid is still, very popular, but we chose not to put hyaluronic acid in Super Saturated intentionally because we were like, we want glycerin to shine. And I think we really achieved that. And we're really proud of that.
Are you a beauty or wellness brand looking to showcase your work alongside the top in the industry? The Glossy Beauty Awards provides the opportunity to recognize your company's work with categories including Skincare Brand of the Year, Beauty CEO of the Year, Beauty Brand of the Year, and many others. This is your chance to showcase the campaigns, initiatives, products, and practices that make your brand truly stand out. Join the esteemed ranks of past winners like Rare Beauty, Olaplex, and Ulta Beauty. Discover more and start your entry at glossy.co/awards/beauty.
So in January, you raised $3.3 million from Greycroft, where Catherine Power is a partner. It was announced in April. As you know, I'm also a marketing girly, so a little bit less on the venture side. But what will you guys primarily be using those funds for?
Yeah, I think prior to that fundraise, since the beginning of this brand, have always been really scrappy, and we've done a lot with this brand, basically just us. And people are always surprised at how small the brand was and how much we were able to accomplish. And on top of that, we had not spent any paid marketing dollars up until a few months ago. We were not running paid ads at all to grow. It was all organic, driven by influencer community, word of mouth. And that's a lot easier when your products are great. People want to tell, like people ask, like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know, make a great product. And I know that's not the answer everybody wants to hear. That's not the whole thing, right? But it really makes marketing easier when the product's actually good. So that's a life hack for all the marketers out there. So have someone who's really good at making products. So yeah, I'm lucky.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I think because we hadn't spent, paid marketing dollars, we were still like, I feel like we really saturated, no pun intended, kind of that niche skintellectual audience. I think, when we raised that round from Greycroft, we were really focused on building out our team. So for this fundraise, we are building out our team, currently doing that. And we are investing in marketing big time because we have so many fabulous products. Not so many, but soon to be so many.
So many in my mind and in the lab.
So many in the mind. Yeah. Yes. So many in our minds. But we have, a few fabulous products, and we have a clear hero, super saturated. And we were like, more people need to know about this product. And we want to own the fact that we are still to date kind of the only like glycerin forward serum on the market. I'm really proud of that. And I think it speaks to the innovation we're able to create, where there was a video on TikTok where someone was making videos about undupable products, and all of our products were in it.
Wow.
I was like, hell yeah. Like these are undupable products. And I think that is always a concern, but we have a special window now where we're like, okay, we have stuff that we've really verified is like a banger, and we want to get it out to as many people as possible. So really hiring and marketing on that fundraise was super important, but then also investing in innovation. So we actually have now an in-house lab in New York City. So Emmy, prior to this year, Emmy and I were actually remote co-founders, and she was actually in our lab in North Carolina, which was in our manufacturer, who we were able to get lab space from. Now we're formulating in our office alongside the marketing team, right? Alongside, the entire team who gets to see the process of R&D. And I think that's really exciting because it feeds innovation, and it makes us better at marketing these products because they have Emmy right next to them making products. And so, outside of team and marketing, R&D specifically, like really investing in new formulas and innovation. Innovation's not easy. It takes a lot of trials and building out R&D and our R&D capabilities.
Amazing. And we were talking a little bit about even just a few years ago when Avant-Garde came out, there was like this sort of tension and debate of like clean beauty versus science. And it's died down a little. I mean, like the clean beauty world has lost some of its traction. I think even quote, I always put clean in quotes in my writing just because of the fact that it's a really simple reason for me. It's just that there's no agreed upon standard definition. So how can I really use that as a standard term and expect my readers to know what I mean? I think that's sort of why I do that as a journalist. But, as experiment sort of has perhaps, and I don't want to like put a stake in the ground on this, but less to prove, quote, on why consumers shouldn't be afraid of it, again, quote, scientific ingredients or chemical ingredients. How does the brand change? How does the packaging change? We're going to get to it, but there's an exciting new product about to launch. And I don't want to say that the aesthetic is necessarily different, but I don't know, when I got the box, the color felt a little different to me. What are you guys thinking as the brand enters? It's what is it? How many years? I can't do math.
Next year will be fifth.
Fifth? Wow.
Unofficially, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because there was kind of a soft launch, so it's a little different. But
and we did take like a hiatus as we raised our first round and lived life. But the brand officially, quote unquote, launched April 2022. But definitely we've existed for longer than that. I've been working on this. So it's like, we're in our fourth year we're in our fourth-ish year. Going to enter our fifth.
And for a brand, that's right, kind of a stage of maturation, right? So like, what are you guys thinking? I know I just kind of threw a lot at you, but I feel like you get my vibe, right?
Totally. And I think just to touch on the first part of that, we've actually seen the trend unfold in real time. When we first started in 2020 and we're concepting the brand, clean still had a really strong foothold. I remember in our first fundraise, I was told by an investor, clean beauty is table stakes. And if you guys can't do that, it's table stakes at this point. And I said, I will bet you $100 million that it's not. And we didn't take their investment, but so it was, and it's something that I had felt confident clean beauty was going to decline for a long time. Even in my thesis that I wrote in 2016, 2017 on beauty, I would mention clean beauty. And I was like, the pendulum eventually will swing back the other way because science at the end of the day is true, whether you believe it or not. clean, and as you put it in scare quotes, like it doesn't have an agreed upon definition. It doesn't really mean much. So at the end of the day, like it will eventually be a trend, right? And so I think we've seen kind of that evolution in real time and seeing more brands as the tides have shifted. Like in our second fundraise, I've seen multiple VC firms that I had talked to previously switch their thesis to clinically backed beauty when they used to focus on clean. And we became a hot little commodity because we actually had clinical backing for all of our products. We were two chemists. We actually really cared about the science and clinical story of our products. And so I think seeing more brands adding in science-backed really also prompted, and seeing more brands also adopt that Gen Z green. And we've started thinking more about like, look, all of these things are authentic to us, but understanding that we exist in the context, right, on the internet, we need to make sure that we don't get lost in that noise and that we still stand out and that we're a brand that evolves with the times. Something I learned in branding when kind of like studying different brands is like, Glossier obviously is a great brand and is very much a staple at this point, but there was a time, and I think there is still a time, that millennial pink is not as exciting as it used to be. And I think for a while, I think Glossier is evolving this over time, but for a while, I think Glossier was actually hampered by how strong their brand guidelines were, how they didn't evolve with the times. And for Experiment, it's in the name. We have the ability, we need to build the brand to be able to evolve. And so when you're looking at our new launch, you're not wrong. There is a difference. And I'm so glad that you picked that up, actually. And you can actually see it in our products, from avant-garde to super saturated buffer jelly to software, and then our new launch. There is like eras that you see. And we're actually working on right now kind of bringing more harmony to the brand as we also look to next year, which, we're currently talking with major retailers. And so we're really thinking about, okay, where does Experiment live in the real world? And how do we bring the brand to people on shelf? And how does that look? And how are we communicating both the clinical and science aspects of the brand? But because our packaging is fun, how do we bring those two things together and make it obvious on shelf when I'm not there to explain it. There's no web copy, or they're not coming from a video that explains the brand, right? They're just seeing this on shelf. So it's really important that our packaging is able to convey that hot and smart dichotomy that we like to build for the brand. And that's not an easy task. And so, we've really slowly but surely been chipping away at that. And now we're finally at a point with our new launch where we're like, we love this. We want to bring that harmony to the rest of the brand.
Do you guys sell that hat that says hot and smart?
We sold out recently, I think within the last month or so.
Excellent brand merch. Bring it back. Emmy, one quick chemistry question. Are there ingredients that it is fair for consumers to be afraid of? Or, again, the amount that I bring up my mom on this podcast, unreal. Shout out, Mom. Hi. Love you. I get DMs from her. I got one last night about microplastics. And again, I think that we really do have to keep in mind the bubble that we live in, right? And I find myself being like, Mom, you don't have to be afraid of things that are sitting on the shelves at Target or whatever. These major conglomerates are not out to get you. But how can consumers navigate this? Because I think that we forget how much people are just going about their daily lives, clocking in and out of work and then seeing these headlines and they're not chemists. I'm not a chemist. I'm a journalist. I don't know this stuff. I'm relying on people like you to tell me to then tell my mom.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. I remember when clean beauty first started, and actually going further back, natural beauty was pre-clean beauty. And I thought it was very interesting that the answer was according to clean and natural beauty, turning to these small brands, home crafted, all natural, that that's where safety was found. And that's actually the opposite. I've worked at a conglomerate before. I have seen the level the rigidity of their safety and quality testing that's required for a large brand to bring a product to market. It's astronomical. And these small brands, which I'm not us, experiment not included in small brands.
Just except for us.
Except for us. I'm talking more like home crafted brands though, like on Etsy. Like they aren't even aware of the regulations and the safety testing and the quality testing that's required to bring a product to market. So actually, I mean, my answer is typically the conglomerates are the ones that are the least likely to be out to get you. And I mean, I'm team, granted, like on the synthetic and the natural side, there are obviously ingredients that should never end up in cosmetics. We do have regulations in this country that requires our skincare and our cosmetics to be safe. So as long as a company is aware of and following FDA guidelines, then those products are safe. So yeah. I feel like I was rambling a little bit there. I'm not sure if that was
you weren't
helpful.
at all. That was really, really clear and concise way to put it, actually. So while I wish that I could take our listeners through every experiment product, because they're, it's still a small brand, but two others that we didn't get into. There, as we mentioned, is one coming out soon. And I want to kind of leave our listeners with Plasma Wash, which is coming out soon, the brand's first cleanser. You mentioned you guys are talking to retailers. It's going to be an exciting next couple months. Right now, the brand is found direct-to-consumer in Urban Outfitters, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Emmy, you want to start by telling us a bit about the chemistry behind Plasma Wash, and then Lisa, you can tell us a bit about the marketing?
Yeah, so Plasma Wash is a moisture depositing facial cleanser. And it actually, like, as I said earlier, in typical experiment fashion, like we don't chase ingredients to like lead our innovation. We want to make a product that's better than what's on the market. And so typically when you're looking for a cleanser, you're looking for something that's going to be an effective cleanser. You want it to remove your makeup, SPF, dirt, grime, and you want it to respect your skin barrier. You want it to be non-stripping. And so we were thinking we can do one better than that. And we wanted to create a cleanser that, in addition to effectively removing your makeup and your SPF, we wanted it to actually hydrate your skin and decrease TOOL, which is transepidermal water loss. So TOOL is a measurement that reflects the strength of your skin barrier. If your TOOL is high, then your skin is losing a lot of water and your barrier isn't strong. If your TOOL is low, then your skin is actually able to retain the moisture that is put into your skin. And so in order to do that, we created a cleanser that has two ingredients that are working together to moisturize your skin after rinse off. We have 15% glycerin in there, which we all know and love. We've already talked about her, in combination with this ingredient called castrol malleate, which is a lipid analog that actually behaves kind of similarly to ceramides in your skin. And what castrol malleate is able to do, which is really interesting, is it basically holds on to glycerin and it deposits it onto your skin even after your cleanser is rinsed off. So it allows your skin to be continuously hydrated after you wash it. And as Lisa was kind of hinting at earlier, we got really great clinical results to show this. So we did a split face test where you compare our cleanser to just splashing your face with water. And over the course of 8 hours, the side of your face, the control that where the panelists splash their face with water, it loses hydration over time and the barrier is maintained. When on the side of the face where the panelists use the cleanser, you actually are gaining hydration over the course of 8 hours and your transepidermal water loss is being reduced. So your barrier is being strengthened. So we were so excited to see those results. Obviously, as I formulate, we have some instrumentation in the lab so we can do kind of rough tests while I'm formulating to make sure we're on the right track. But I mean, these results even like exceeded my expectations. So we are so excited.
Yeah. And talking about the marketing side, I mean, the clinicals are always so helpful for marketing because we're able to like really substantiate claims and put our 2 feet on the ground and say, like, we know that this is what this does, where, not every brand invests in both instrumental and perception studies. A lot of brands just do perception. And I understand it's very expensive to do instrumental studies, but it's part of our brand promise to do so. And part of our raises as well. It's in the budget. But on the marketing side of things, I think one thing Experiment has become known for is our, slightly elaborate or increasingly elaborate launches that are thematic. So, with super saturated buffer jelly, we were still early on, couldn't do as many exciting things, but still really worked hard on a budget to create really fun launches. And I remember for buffer jelly, someone in the comments of our launch post was like, Experiment launches feel like Apple launches. That meant a lot to me because I was like, that's how I see it. It is, we're bringing innovation to the market, one product at a time. Each product is a hero. And for software, we really leaned into that. Experiment launches feel like Apple launches because we went very
software is the brand's lip balm.
Our lip treatment. And it's spelled software, soft, W-E-A-R. So a little play on words there, which we love to do. We really leaned into kind of like an era of science optimism in society where, the tech optimism in the 90s and early 2000s was huge. And so we really leaned into those aesthetics to create something new for software. And when we thought about Plasma Wash, the evolution of our launches, we were able to fundraise. So I'm like, okay, we can actually have a bigger budget to do something larger, swing harder. And cleansers are such a crowded category, as pretty much every category we've gone into. I think Experiment also, we think, and as Emmy pointed out, like we make products that are better than what's available on the market. And we go into really crowded categories like lip, for example. We launched software at the height of the lip treatment fatigue. People were skeptical that we were able to create something different. And we did. So for a cleanser is actually even harder to create something different because at the end of the day, a cleanser is a cleanser. You want it to clean. But really most goals of cleansers are just do no harm, right? Don't mess up my barrier. Don't strip my skin. And if it does that and it cleans well, it's a winner, right? But for us, we were like, truly, what if we had a cleanser that could actually repair your barrier instead of just not harm it? And for Plasma Wash, I'm really excited for the launch video. We're collaborating with someone very exciting for it. She's a really big TikToker, kind of pop star vibe, but very like homegrown influencer. And so when we thought about Plasma Wash, we often go back to history to see like when in society did we love science? Did we actually were excited about science? For Experiment's branding, we often think about like when we were kids, how was science branded and marketed to us, right? Bill Nye, chemistry kits, stuff like that. There was wonder, there was awe, there was excitement. It wasn't sterile, clinical, boring. And for Plasma Wash, to me, frankly, it sounded like an old school detergent. It's like Plasma Wash now with more suds, right? And so we really went back to like 50s, 60s space race era. This was also a time when chemical companies were really innovating in the chemistry space and consumer products. So detergents were being invented, right? Saran wrap was invented in the 50s and marketed to consumers, right? So plastic was being invented for better or worse. But, there was a lot of chemical innovation being brought to consumers. So consumers were very optimistic about what science could make their lives look and feel like. And so we really leaned into that mood, that aesthetic, that feeling, and brought it to the modern age and experimentified it and made it relevant to consumers today, especially with kind of the people that we partnered with. It's a very fun, almost campy, silly launch that's focusing really on the cleansing innovation that we're bringing to the market. And I'm particularly excited about the PR box. We saw a lot of success with our software PR box. It had a sound card in it that a lot of influencers posted. And, we're seeing, investing in our influencers and our community genuinely pays off. So super excited about, what we're going to be sending to, our community, and particularly just excited about, like showing what we can do with a launch at Experiment and like continuing to build our reputation for fun and exciting launches, but also continuing to build what we call, like, we work with the same partners for every launch for video and photo, but building the lore, as we say, around the brand and what consumers can expect from us. So yeah, super excited about it.
Amazing. And that comes out early October, correct?
October 1st.
Congratulations. Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Lisa. This was so much fun. Thank you for coming on the Glossy Beauty Podcast, and congrats on the upcoming launch.
Thank you, Sarah, so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Glossy Beauty Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us out. And of course, visit glossy.co/beauty for even more coverage of the beauty industry. Bye.